Okay, so maybe you want to say this is, you announced, and I just wanted to talk.
Oh, good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for October 27th.
Okay, and I just wanted to announce with great thrill that we finally have an executive director, Ryan Singer, who's sitting there or standing there. And so that's who you should call when you have your questions. We'll have a phone number for him. Do we have a phone number for him?
We do.
Yes, it's Jeff's old phone number, right?
Okay, Jeff's old phone number. So we are thrilled, yay. Okay.
Okay, back to the calendar. We'll begin with the special order calendar, decision items. Item number 1, 15907BZ, 2402 86th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, I see that we received the submissions on this letter from the elevator company stating that the elevator is functioning properly despite violations, a letter from the sprinkler company that finds that they're in order, and photographs that show unobstructed egress. So I'm okay with this. Anybody else? Okay.
Okay, next item. Item number 2, 15908BZ, 6870 Spring Street, Manhattan.
I didn't have any issues with this. Okay.
Continued hearing items. Item number 3, 24535BZ, 12305 101st Avenue, Queens.
That's 1 3.
We have an adjournment request on this.
Another one, wow. Item number 4, 92157BZ, 6602 New York Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, my comments are the following. There's, based on other submissions that were given since the last hearing, there's planting shown along the perimeter, along the residential perimeter, that sort of stops abruptly. There's kind of like 3 bushes. Unless there's some physical reason why that can't be continued, that should be continuous along the residential boundary. Also, the treatment of the wall on the adjoining property, there's a wall that's kind of, looks like there had been a fence, and then the fence was removed, and it revealed sort of never been maintained, never been painted. That really should be attended to because it really is an eyesore. We had also talked about at the last hearing that the parking spots should be striped, and there wasn't any statement about that being done, to be done. We'd like to see that done. And then there were other things that we discussed at the hearing that were not mentioned in the submission. One was the hours of operation need to be corrected in the statement of facts, that there was to be landscaping proposed. There's no discussion of the existing strip that adjoins the residential area that's currently filled with weeds. There's no discussion about the parking layout and the operation plan, which we had asked for, the plan to show how cars will be handled on site. And the statement was to include a narrative as to why automotive service station use is still appropriate, that you look at the neighborhood, the surrounding uses, history of the gas station. All that should be in the statement of facts. Anybody else?
Well, I had just asked that they look into who is maintaining that sort of strip that they have at the moment with, I guess, some sort of little green sort of Christmas tree type plants. They say that they don't really know whose property that is or who's supposed to maintain it, and I think that they need to find that out, and if it's theirs, then they need to make sure that they continue to maintain it. So I'd like them to go back and give us a definitive answer.
And I'd just like to note that the proof of removal of the underground storage tanks, the site plan that was given to us from 1996 actually indicates plantings adjacent to the residential building on 66th Street. So apparently sometime between 1996 and now, those plantings were removed from the plans, and I just want to know why and can they be restored?
Okay. Commissioner Otley Brown, you have any?
No, I just will echo what you said, that they still need to show the striping for the cars awaiting service and as well show some sort of organizational plan for how that site is going to be operating, because it is kind of small and there's just so much potential for it to spill out onto the sidewalk like we saw previously.
Thank you.
Item number 5, 229-84BZ, 7528 Queens Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, this one, we're very appreciative of the responsiveness of the applicant. We received photos showing that the building exterior has been painted and the barbed wire removed, and that there was repair and repainting of most of the perimeter fence. And I note that this is a request for modification of the hours of operation as well. My only comment is that since the applicant provided such great photographs, it revealed that when the barbed wire was removed, the supports for the barbed wire remain in place. Those should be removed as well, because it looks very odd that there's these kind of sloping portions of the fence that do nothing, except maybe function as a handle. And then also, the images provided show that the portion of the fence where the barbed wire was removed is in need of repair and painting like the rest of the fence, so please do that and submit photos that that's been done. Anybody else? Okay.
Item number 6, 17803BZ, 11402 Van Wyck Expressway, Queens.
Okay, this one also, applicant showed photographs showing that the excess signage was removed and proof of the UST removal and the closed spills. There had been a spill on the site that was closed. And then with respect to that, I just wonder who owns the fence that's shown in the photo of the northwest corner looking south. If that's owned by the applicant, the slats are ragged and need to be replaced. So I'd like to understand whose fence that is. Any other comment? Okay.
Item number 7, 31806BZ, 4905 Astoria Boulevard, Queens.
I understand this, there was a request to adjourn this, but I don't have a date. Was there a date for the adjournment? Do we know?
I'm not aware, sorry.
Okay.
No?
You don't know? Okay.
Okay.
She'll find that out for tomorrow. Okay.
Item number 8, 7612BZ, 148 Norfolk Street, Brooklyn.
There was also a request to adjourn this.
Okay, new cases. Item number 9, 54556BZ, 2001-2007 Williamsbridge Road in the Bronx.
Okay, this one, I didn't have any comments, but Commissioner Hinkson, I asked.
I actually have some of Commissioner Otley Brown's notes, so
Oh,
if
okay.
she would like to articulate her.
Oh, yes, yes. I actually went to the site, first of all, and there's graffiti and there's excess signage, and they have to spruce up the landscaping along the residential line as well as showing it on the plans. The site is in disarray. It needs a lot of improvement. It's also a site that's actually very heavily used, so it would be great to get that site into shape.
My comment is, I read through the resolutions, and I know that on the last C of O, they have used car sales listed on the C of O, but I don't see that distinctly approved in any of the former resolutions, and I think it may have been an error to put it on the C of O. And now in their proposed signage, they're showing a separate sign with a separate name for used cars, and it sounds like an additional business on the site.
Okay. So the applicant really needs to address that, otherwise they need to modify the application. Okay. Okay.
Item number 10, 16494BZ, 84 Hugh Grant Circle, Bronx.
I didn't have any comments on this.
I had a few questions. If they could clarify the amount of square footage of this PCE because the resolution says 14,000, yet their statement says 10,650 square feet. And if they can also clarify or state what the hours are going to be, because they don't state it, but the resolution does state Monday to Thursday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., Saturday, Sunday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And if you go to the site, there is a massive graffiti on the bulkheads that should be addressed.
Anything else?
Okay.
Go. Number 11, 19502BZ, 2797 Linden Boulevard, Brooklyn.
Okay, I didn't have any comments on this one.
They have excess signage. I think they've got some banners up on the rear fence, and if they can, please remove those and show us evidence that they've removed all of the excess signage, that would be great.
It appears from the plans that the menu board may be adjacent to residential property, so if so, could they talk about the sound attenuation for that menu board? And also, is there an addition, because it says as if they're legalizing a new addition, however, there's nothing in the paperwork that addresses it. It just says it on our calendar, so it's just a request for clarification of that.
Also, I went to the site, the signage says they're open 24 hours, but I don't believe they were ever approved for 24-hour operation. And in addition to the menu board being adjacent to the residential, the trash area is also, I'd like to know what the hours of pickup are. And I think they're requesting a removal of the term. And I guess in the past what we've done is we've notified the adjacent residents specifically to find out if there's any objections.
Objections to the
Removal of the term.
term? Oh.
I'm not sure we're considering that, but
Okay, appeals calendar, decision items, item number 12, 8914A, 215 East 64th Street, Manhattan.
Okay, this one, we're actually going to take it off the calendar because the applicant needs time to address fire safety issues.
Item number 13, 10614A, 84 Williams Street, Manhattan.
Okay, I didn't have any comments on this.
Neither did I.
Item number 14, 14214A, 94 Fulton Street, 92 Fulton Street.
No comments either on this?
No. Item number 15, 23514A, 40-20 Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn.
Oops, Atlantic Avenue.
1561 14A.
What?
Huh? We have,
I have Massachusetts. Is
I
that
have
right?
Massachusetts. What is this one?
Atlantic Avenue was
It's
the...
the-
No, Atlantic Avenue was laid over from last week,
Yes, the
so we
building
added
back.
to the calendar.
Okay.
Oh.
I did not get that as
Okay.
an
Okay.
ad.
Does anyone have any comments? Because you do, okay.
That's the HPD supervised.
The build-it-back.
Right,
Ah, okay.
without the prototype.
Without the,
They gave us a revised site plan, which is
Right.
acceptable.
okay. What's the calendar number?
23514A.
I didn't have that, so, sorry.
Okay, more to follow.
Okay, sorry. New cases, item number 16, 6114A, 11 Massachusetts Street South, Staten Island.
Okay, this one, we got a letter from the fire department indicating that they oppose this application to allow a dwelling to be located on the bed of an unmapped street because the curb-to-curb distance is 20 feet. Perhaps the survey is unclear. We're not really sure what the fire department was looking at. If this is incorrect, if the fire department misinterpreted it, the applicant really needs to provide a better survey and address their issues. Anybody else on this one?
No, that said it for me.
Item number 17, 10914A, 44 Marjorie Street, Staten Island.
This one, we need photographs of the site to show it has been cleaned of debris. It's actually an extremely messy site, so we need this cleaned before we can move forward on this.
Also, I had a question, just while they're thinking about it. I know the fire department is stating there should be no parking on the site, which gave me some concern. The applicant is saying that the parking is waived, but when you go through the parking regulations for the M1 district for a use group 16 in parking category G, I'm not sure the waiver applies. So if they could clarify that.
Okay. That's it? Excellent. Zoning calendar, decision items. Item number 18, 48-14BZ, 174 Falmouth Street, Brooklyn.
I did not have any additional issues on this.
I did, and it has to do with the second floor balcony, which is in the front yard. And I had mentioned at last hearing that I don't believe it complies with section 23-131 in terms of it has a roof and it extends 7 feet 8 inches, and the zoning resolution states that the maximum depth into the front yard is 6 feet, and it should be unenclosed. So this structure that they actually have in the front yard is actually at the roof line. The roof extends into the front yard more than the 7 feet 8 inches because the eaves are even
Come over the edge.
deeper. So into a 15-foot front yard, this must extend about 9 feet. And since it's in a zoning, it's in a floodplain, the structure is actually about 45 feet above the ground. So it's, I think the zoning resolution to me is clear on the second floor balcony, it should be unenclosed.
Okay.
And we brought this up at the
We did.
previous hearing, and they
Plans
did
were not
not,
changed.
they didn't change the plan.
So since we closed that hearing on the 23rd of September, we need to reopen that, and the applicant needs to respond to those open issues. And if necessary, get clarification from the Department of Buildings that that's an acceptable solution.
Item number 19, continued hearing items. Item number 19, 34312BZ, 570 East 21st Street, Brooklyn.
I think that we're going to adjourn this matter, this item.
Okay. Item number 20, 17613BZ, 31 Bond Street, Manhattan.
Okay. This is a very interesting case. There were a lot of submissions there, or there were some submissions. There was a Phase 2 subsurface investigation work plan submitted, a revised statement of facts, a revised Department of Buildings objection, an area study, and a lesser variance option at 5 FAR with a 30-foot rear yard. The statement of facts continues to claim that costs for the as-of-right due to the building state of is in part due to the building state of disrepair, which is due to neglect and is self-created, so that must be excluded from any of the financial analyses. Should be absolutely taken out, and we should understand that it's not there. It's not clear in reviewing the financial analyses that that's not factored in. One question that I have also is one of the as-of-right scenario for a hotel was done without plans. I'm curious how the takeoff was done for the construction cost, if there were no plans. Statement of facts states that of the 26 25-foot wide lots in the study area, which is a 1,000 square foot radius, 18 are residential in part. 7 are remaining that are without residential, contain a non-conforming commercial use on the ground floor, or the lot is shallower than the premises. This is really just the crux of it. The lot is shallower than the premises, allowing for more light and air, hence it is more marketable for a conforming use. So both of those statements beg the question of the lesser variance option. What if the ground floor in this as-of-right, in the proposed were retail, because that seems to be a more valuable use? And what if the building were cut back to be shallower? Wouldn't that automatically make the floors more valuable? In Another question you might make is, how really is a shallower building more marketable? Isn't it more desire to have a deeper floor plate with more floor area per floor? But that subject of the shallowness of the building being more valuable, more marketable, was repeated over and over and over again throughout the application in many places. So if that's the argument, then why isn't the lesser variance with a nice cut back rear yard a much more marketable, more valuable building? There are other some of the small buildings are joint live work, and these were either loft conversions or by variance or M15A, or they're in M15As. So are those comparables when you're using something that's already received a special approval? Because in an M15B, you don't get joint live work as of right. Then the other is also in the statement of fact, it refers to the as of right studies that Mr. Pauls did, but it leaves out the lesser variance study. The statement of facts findings does not discuss the lesser variance option at all, and should. The study of the 7 other similar sites confusingly argues that those properties are more valuable because they have deeper rear yards, hence providing better light and air to the residential and office uses. But on the proposed project, that deeper rear yard that deeper rear yard is considered a hardship. So they seem to be contradictory. More sites are benefiting from ground floor use group 6 retail also. I'm repeating myself a little bit, sorry. Also, with one of the comparable, 63 Spring is a triangular corner lot, so that should actually be discounted differently than the other sites. In terms of the financials, we don't have backup for the comparables. In terms of the sales comparables for the units, we need images to show where they're located, what the floor plans are like. For instance, the proposed has duplexes, and we don't know what kinds of units these comparables are. Are they simplexes, duplexes? Do they have balconies and terraces like what's proposed? Do they have amenity space? There's a lot of discussion about the absence of amenity space in this building. Do those other buildings have amenity space? But actually, these units are very luxurious, so they have kind of their own built-in amenity space. And then there's a claim that that bedrooms, in terms of the as of right, there's a claim that if they cut back the rear yard to allow for a 30-foot rear yard, bedrooms will be lost because of the reduction in the building depth. But actually, there are, for example, huge bathrooms with sort of shower tub combos that could be reduced. You could also, there's oddly a sunroom at the front of the bedroom levels. That's confusing. I'm not really sure what the sunroom is for, but it takes up a lot of depth of the building. And then there are also these double height spaces that increase the bulk of the building that could be eliminated. Many of them don't seem to really be great. They're not like grand cathedral ceiling type spaces. They're more like a cutout of a portion of a space. And with respect to the rear yard, the proposal shows a 30-foot rear yard that follows the angle of the site. What if it was a 30-foot rear yard that cut across straight, so it's a more typical building at the rear as opposed to dealing with that strange angle? Those are my comments. Any others?
I just, to add my voice to what you've said, I did not necessarily believe that they could not find a 5.0 FAR solution. They're looking at 5.4. And that 0.4 seems to net them an additional 8% in return. And I think that they have to really prove that to me, that I just don't see that there's such a disparity between a 0.4 FAR and this sort of great leap to an 8% increase in their return. I do believe that they can reconfigure their floor plates a bit to be able to give us a 30-foot rear yard. They have a lot of open spaces, sort of these cutouts around the stairs, around in the living area that don't really seem to do much other than just be a cutout. So If they're just sort of aesthetic, or you want to bring more light into a space, that's fine, but maybe that can be done with a 3-foot or a 4-foot wide space as opposed to a 6 or 7 or an 8-foot wide space. Also, I'm questioning their use of the cellar for their kitchen area. If they could just clarify whether bringing gas for cooking is permitted at the cellar level. I would appreciate them giving me some authority for that. Those are my comments.
Anyone else?
I have quite a few financial comments.
Okay.
Last hearing, we had asked for them to adjust the site value downwards because the comparables that were used actually had legal retail, and retail's not allowed as of right here. And so the report was redone, and the comparables were each adjusted downward by 10% for the fact that the comparables actually had CFOs that stated they could have retail. However, there was something else done to those comparables, and they were adjusted again in ways that we did not request. And so instead of that 10% reduction resulting in a reduction of 10% in the overall average price per square foot of available FAR, it ended up taking off only a few dollars per square foot. So I did the math myself, and if you take the 10% off, you end up with a difference of about $75 per square foot of available FAR, and that brings the site value down by a little bit more than $1 million, which is very important to note because then that suggests, along with other things, that the E-finding is not yet met, not with the proposed. In addition, the residential comparables were reduced in value, like you state, based on the assumption that there was a loss of subcellar and loss of amenities because of that. However, the comparables in the neighborhood that they used, it doesn't state what the amenities are. So being that we don't even know if there are amenities in the comparables, it doesn't make sense to adjust downward. As well, they also make a statement that the 5.0 FAR building would result in apartments that have a lesser number of bedrooms, and that would not work. However, the comparables are not based on bedrooms. The comparables were all based on square footage. So we're not even sure what number of bedrooms are in each of the units that we used as comparables. So for those reasons, I would not agree with the assumptions to adjust those residential sales prices downward. And I also wanted to note that the site value should also come down. Anyway, the result of that is that the annualized return on a 5.0 FAR is actually feasible. It's somewhere around 5%, possibly more, and the annualized return on the proposed project is over 12%, and so therefore they need to cut the building down in size in order to meet the E-finding.
I just felt that all the cases they cite had an FAR of 5.0. It's very consistent in this particular area, and I wasn't completely convinced on their argument regarding the hoistway. And if it had been changed to floor area prior to 1961, it's okay. Because it was just their opinion that the timbers were older, but I didn't find that definitive.
Right, okay. And just in terms of the rear yards, if the applicant were actually to study the BSA's history with respect to the reduction in rear yards, it never approves rear yards that are less than 30 feet unless there's a very extreme case where the financials absolutely don't support a deep rear yard, and it doesn't look like this is one of those extreme cases.
Item number 21, 8-14BZ, 1824 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, the applicant made some submissions of revised plans. It would be helpful if in future we can understand the difference between what was submitted and the next level, because the changes are so subtle, it's actually hard to find them. So apparently roof heights were lowered, but it's not perceptible. And I still have a problem with this application because I'm not finding the justification for the massing There's no justification programmatically for the depth of the rear yard. As I mentioned in the prior hearing, you could easily eliminate the anteroom and foyer to the living room and retain the ideal program that is being sought with the same size rooms, and then that would reduce the depth of the rear, increase the depth of the rear yard by that much. Even if it's not the full 30 feet, at least you get more depth on the rear yard. And there's also, on the drawings for this project, in dashed lines, there's a proposal that indicates if DOB approves, then that would be built. Proposal to include a garage in the rear yard and a porch also in the rear yard. If you throw all of those things into the rear yard, there's an area of about 5 by 8 where a human being could stand. And I'm kind of curious about the abhorrence to outdoor space on these applications, filling up the entire rear yard so that all there is a room for, I don't know, the storage of bicycles. I'm not really sure what goes on there. And that will definitely have an impact on the quality of the neighborhood because you effectively have no rear yard. It's filled with structure. And the applicant also, in terms of the rear yard, was asked to submit rear yard studies, and instead what we got was a Google satellite image taken in summertime, so all you can see is trees and the tops of things, and it's impossible for us to understand what the condition of the rear yard is. The work to be done to establish that an imposition like this on a rear yard would be to go to the site and photograph on the site sort of a 360. What does the rear yard condition look like immediately around that rear yard? Go on the roof of the existing house, if that's doable, given whatever the condition of the existing house is, and look down into the rear yard with a camera. The other aspect of that is also that the comparative neighborhood study does not study the massing on the block, and the mass map provided had no link to the locations listed. So we're looking at a map, and then no way of knowing what on that map has to do with the studied locations. It's like we're being asked to do all the work and all the research. That's the job of the applicant, actually. And then in terms of, I asked the applicant to have the architect submit an axonometric and photo montage of the streetscape. I understand that this architect is still in sort of a learning curve, but that's not an axonometric that was submitted. It's illegible. We can't understand what the roof lines are. It doesn't need to be from a bird flying directly over the roof. The idea is to try to explain to us what does the house look like in 3D so we can understand better how this massing is going to affect the neighborhood, and that was not done. And ditto for the photo montage skills. If this architect doesn't know how to do it, I suggest someone else be engaged to do this. This is a very standard technique done by architects all over the country, if not the world, and it's time to learn how to do that. Also, in terms of the neighborhood study, 7 examples of other houses in the area were provided, but to show that there are other houses that have more FAR, but none of those are on the block in question, except for one, 1841 East 22nd Street, and we don't know, based on the information provided, whether that one was enlarged legally. Legality is also in question for 2 others of the 7 that were provided, and 5 of the examples provided are corner lots with no rear yard requirements at all. So how does that kind of a submission make an argument that this proposal will not have a negative impact on the character of the neighborhood?
I totally agree with everything that you've said. I think you're doing the architect a disservice by telling us that he's not able to perform some pretty basic functions. I don't know anybody who could get out of architecture school without knowing how to do an axonometric. I think that's pretty simple. I just had some questions about their massing, and they still have quite a pretty big space between the ceiling rafter at the bedroom and then the roof rafter, and that space seems to be just a void, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to kind of maybe redesign that roof line a little bit to get rid of some of that and bring down the massing in the front of the house a bit. And I think they still have some wiggle room there, and it just, is going to take them to look at it and really figure out a design that makes sense for their roof structure.
Any other comments?
Item number 22, 17-14BZ, 600 McDonald Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, well, at the last hearing, there was a big discussion about, in part, the massiveness of this building, and it's an extremely long building, and there was a discussion about school design, and the applicant even came with an example of a photograph to show that there are contemporary ways of approaching a very large school and having a building lifted on pilotis like it's going to have for outdoor area. And the discussion was lively and friendly and showed that there was going to be real responsiveness on the part of the applicant. And instead, we got nothing. We also asked that there would be an adequate trash storage area provided for this huge school that's going to have a huge amount of trash, and instead there was a little bit of a storage bin that looks like it's enough to hold 3 garbage cans. And how is this addressing neighborhood issues, in addition to which there's going to be so many school buses parked out front, all of these things, none of these were addressed. And we were very clear in asking our questions. So the only thing that we can do, because this project is going to have a huge impact on the neighborhood, both from the point of view of traffic, parking, pedestrian circulation, massiveness, adjacent neighbors, and apparently there's also some open DEP issues concerning air quality and noise that have been open since April of this year. Since none of those responses are forthcoming, we're going to take this off the calendar, and when the applicant is ready with a submission that's responsive to our questions, we'll take a look at it and see whether we put this back on the calendar.
Item number 23, 4214BZ, 783 Lexington Avenue, Manhattan.
Okay, with this one, I just note that we have sign off from the Fire Department, Department of Investigation, and received the massage therapist licenses. I don't have any comments.
The only question was that, I guess they're saying that their signage they have there was grandfather under, prior DOB plans, so we should just note the DOB should review their signage.
Do you have any comments?
No. Yeah, that's it. Item number 24, 6414BZ, 1320 East 23rd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. Okay, this one is similar to the last one we discussed. Again, it's not clear on the new submission. There were revised plans and area study, and again, a satellite photo of supposedly to explain to us what the rear yard condition is provided. But again, it's difficult to tell what the change was in those revised plans. The house remains massive, in part because the dormers are very large and needlessly so. And the height of the extent of the attic is also needlessly long. It has occupiable space for the entire length of the house, and I'm not sure why that's needed. And in terms of the massiveness, removing it would reduce the massiveness. There still needs to be a justification for the rear yard incursion, and similar to what we were talking about, you have to actually study the rear yard, taking photographs from the roof of the building or standing in the rear yard. This proposal also includes a garage and a porch at the rear, both of which will reduce the yard to basically nothing and would have a negative impact on neighborhood character. There was a satellite provided for us to try to figure out, satellite image provided for us to try to figure out what was going on in the rear yard. And one of the arguments was that there's a one-story garage in an adjoining property, A one-story garage is not the same as a two-story plus attic incursion in the rear yard plus a garage and a porch. Sorry. And so you can't make the argument that's consistent with neighborhood character when the garage and the adjoining property is only one story, but you're going to have this massive structure facing it and very close to it. Again, the architect's axonometric is not legible, and the photomontage skills do not support the argument at all that this is consistent with neighborhood character. Also, I note that the front porch extends into the required 15-foot front yard, which further reduces the open space. And so, and I would like to see justification for doing that and the similarities in the neighborhood. So there seems to be just this kind of attack on open space that I'm not understanding. People need to actually leave their houses and not just go onto the sidewalk. They need to leave their houses and do stuff on their property. Maybe, I don't know, wash the dog, whatever it is one does in their backyards, have a barbecue, something. There isn't any place to stand with these proposals, and I don't understand that, and I need help understanding that. With reference to the area study, the comparative study does not study massing on the block. Only 2 sites are on the same block, and they're distant from the site. 12 in all are 12 there are 12 site studies. All are distant from the site. One of these is on a site that's 2 times as large as this site, and there's insufficient data provided for another one of those houses. That kind of distance from the house doesn't establish neighborhood character. Again, the axonometrics are unreadable, and just in capping that, it's the applicant's job to make the argument for us, not the other way around. Any other comments?
Item number 25, 9114BZ, 3420 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, this is that proposal to take advantage of the special permit 73622 for the enlargement of an existing single-family home that has existing non-compliances. But in this case, the proposal is to demolish essentially 4 houses and create an enormous house on a 16,000 square foot lot with 160 feet of frontage and a depth of 100 feet. The first thing was at the last hearing, I specifically asked the applicant to justify how the intent of this special permit applies to this situation. What was the intent of the special permit, and why should it be applied here? And I just ask again, if the concept behind these expansions was behind the special permit was allow a family to expand a little because it's a growing family and it needs a little bit more space, where is the difficulty here in a 16,000 square foot site for the family to expand if it just followed the as of right zoning? How does this resemble how does a 16,000 square foot corner lot have the same kind of restrictions on a family's growth that are presented by a small house on a small lot, which is typical of what these special permits have been applied to? In the urban cartographic study that was supplied, which I just wanted to mention, was an eloquent study, very beautifully done, which had a particular slant that I found amusing. In first place, it tells the history of the development of Midwood, which was quite interesting. And it says, in fact, that Midwood was developed with larger suburban-style homes. I'm curious about, in this case, why then the special permit was actually made applicable in this district. Because unlike some of the other districts where we have tiny homes on tiny lots, these are larger homes on larger lots, none of them anywhere near 16,000 square feet. But why did these homes need this kind of relief? I'm curious, and since Urban Cartographic does such a great historical analysis in general, I'd be interested in hearing from them why they think this special permit applies in this case, or why it was made to apply in this location, and then, of course, to help in that argument about why this special permit should apply to the demolition of 4 homes, or effective demolition of 4 homes. The study, the urban cartographic study, though, does not support a neighborhood characteristic of homes that span 4 lots, and purports to have the board focus only on the FAR of the buildings, not their mass. I don't believe that that's correct. Neighborhood character is actually not something where you kind of walk down the street doing algorithmic calculation of the FAR. In fact, instead, you are looking at the massiveness of buildings, their relationship to the street, their height, and so on. And this would be the only building of its type in the neighborhood, unless you can demonstrate otherwise. There was a study that showed building widths, for example, and out of all of the building widths shown in the study area of 400 feet, only one is 65 feet wide, whereas this house is on a frontage of 160 feet and will be 3 times wider than what is the widest house on the study area. Also, the yard depth study was not legible. I just think that the printing process was poor, so please resubmit that. Also, because it was difficult to understand, I need to understand better what the rear yard depths. I think your rear yard depths were actually not considered in the study, only side yard depths, but this building actually has a portion that is subject to the rear yard requirements. And then again, how in the world could you possibly justify the reduction in the required rear yard on such a huge site where there's so much lot area to locate the site, the building? Any others?
Well, I just had a question that was from our last hearing, and they didn't seem to answer this. I had a question on the existing floor area and how that was calculated. They have a stop work order, and I needed them to show that either they have documentation that the stop work order was lifted and that they're not looking at an illegal addition that perhaps was added, which would then skew their floor area calculations, because they're basing, their new calculation on the existing and what they have, and I don't think they should be able to include any illegal portions of the building. So I think that they need to go back, figure out what, if anything, was illegally built, or if they can prove that their existing building is pristine and that the stop work order for work without a permit means nothing, that would be great. But they did not address that in writing, and I think they need to do that.
Okay. Any other comments?
I actually agree with your comment as regards the rear yard of this property. This property is 160 feet wide, and the orientation of the home is actually on Bedford Avenue. And so the side yard really functions as a rear yard for most of it. And therefore, I think that just having 5 feet as a side yard, while maybe allowed because you're taking advantage of the fact that you're on the corner, really isn't appropriate here. The building is huge, and only 5 feet between that and the other lots is really unfair to everybody surrounding it. It's massive. It's going to be in everybody's backyard. They're going to look out of the window and they're going to be looking straight up at a wall. So I think that with a site this large, there really is no excuse to not have anything less than 20 feet bordering you in the rear.
I agree with Commissioner Otley Brown. My main concern is the frontage on Avenue M. The adjacent home seems to be a lot line building, and they're providing a 5-foot side yard. They're both large buildings, so it looks like almost like one continuous streetscape. Not enough distance between the 2 homes, I believe, even though the 5 feet is only what's required. In addition, I had asked last time about showing that the pre-existing non-compliance of the front yard on Avenue M was legal, and they didn't provide any sandboards or anything like that to show that that's a pre-existing condition.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 26, 9314BZ, 455 West 37th Street, Manhattan.
Okay, I didn't have any comments on this.
I just want to state, this should be filed as a legalization because this is open and operating and has been.
Item number 27, 9614BZ, 290 Dyckman Street, Manhattan.
Okay, this is about the storage facility. I know it's a very modest application. It's still, the submissions that were made, there was a traffic study by Philip Habib and revised financial analyses, but I still have questions with respect to the traffic study. There's a discussion about storage taxis that are owned by the applicant and used to pick up customers and their belongings, but there's no discussion in the traffic study about where these park and whether there's more than one. And if it parks in the loading dock, then doesn't that eliminate one spot in the loading dock? The traffic study also projects the use at this facility based on two other facilities, and collected data by surveying users, which was great, but they actually kind of surveyed by asking on, I guess, users while they were picking up and dropping off, but they didn't count trips, cars, vans, et cetera, at the facility so that we could understand how many actual trips there are in any of these facilities and then make some kind of an adjustment for the difference between those facilities and this one. And that's not clear, like what is the difference between those facilities and this one? Are those more, say, oriented towards office use, or are the storage containers bigger there? Is there a difference, or are they essentially identical facilities except for the size? There's also was a focus in that study on rental and versus vacate activity, but I assume that the most common visit to a storage facility is pick up and drop off of stuff that's kind of relatively small, for which a taxi would be used. Even if you were a few blocks away, if you're picking up a significant amount of stuff, Christmas decorations, clothing to change for the season, it's not something you sort of throw over your arm and then carry away. It's in fact something where you'd have to hail a cab, or you would have a cab. And that wasn't factored in, as far as I could tell, in the study. There was also a discussion about dwell time, and I wonder how will the concurrence of the car, van, and truck at the same time be handled to utilize the loading dock and avoid backup on the street? What if the parking spot, which they were relying on at curbside on Dyckman Street, is taken by a non-facility related vehicle? What if all those things happen at the same time? Does that mean somebody's driving around the block? What goes on? Will it be an effort on the part of the storage facility, for instance, to reserve one parking spot for themselves to talk to DOT, something like that? Then in terms of what type of storage, I already said that. Okay, in terms of the economic analysis, I still actually have a problem with the statement about the loss factor, which in the economic analysis, there's an explanation that the total of space in the building is the same both in the statement of facts and in the economic analysis, but without explaining the difference for the number, in the statement of facts, there's only 5,248 square feet of loading, office, mechanical, vertical circulation, and auxiliary space, whereas in the financials, it's a 12,000 square foot area. I don't understand how that's so different for apparently the same elements. Maybe if there were a plan to show us what it was actually being used as loss factor area, the two numbers should match, and if the statement of facts is wrong, it should be revised. If the financials are wrong, they should be revised. So yeah, and then I go back to the same question that I had before. Like, really, why is loss factor relevant in this case? In the medical offices, they also have loss factors for corridors, lobbies, etc. If you were to talk about a development, so a medical developer who rents out office space to doctors, then that developer gets, say, $500 a week from a doctor who's renting out, and there isn't a loss factor. It's just they rent out room A to the doctor. But the way this has been analyzed is for the medical offices, it's treated as the income to the landlord by renting out the space, and it's a net lease, and so loss factor is not the problem with the landlord. And so I'm again still not seeing the apples to apples comparison. If you were to make it more like, treat the storage facility more like a hotel, where hotels are keys, and you have 200 keys, and each key is this much per night, and then you multiply nights, and then you have vacancy rates, and then you have the cost of services, and then that's deducted. If you did the same with the storage facility, where you say, we have this many boxes of this size, and each of those boxes rents for X dollars, and then you have the cost to whatever, hire the guys and heat and electric and all that stuff, then that's much more akin to how a hotel is analyzed, and that would make more sense to me. And then I'd understand better the comparison. So, yeah, those are my comments.
So basically, what you want is to acknowledge the fact that a self-storage facility operates a business as well as real estate. And so what you want to do is take out the income and the expenses that has to do with the business, and then what remains is just the income and expense for the real estate. Right. That's basically what you're looking at, or what you want the financial analyst to look at. And then the idea of the loss factor, I guess, would probably come into the E-finding as to why the amount of money that's left over can only be attributed to 21,000 square feet versus the 34,000 square feet. Seems like if we could have some sort of backup in that fashion, that would help us to, I guess, meet that B and E finding.
Mm-hmm.
I still had some questions about their traffic study. They gave us the trip purposes, and they talk about the modes of transportation and times and dwell time, but they don't relate that back to current traffic patterns on the two streets that they're going to be fronting. Again, the reason that I'm asking this question is because it's that those streets are feeders to the West Side Highway at Dyckman. And, during peak times, try getting through those streets at 8 a.m. It's virtually impossible. And then trying to get back at, between 4 and 5, it can be an issue as well. So they don't really talk about how their peak hours or their times are, and how they envision people coming to the site, how that relates to peak hours on the streets. So if they can tie that in, I think that would go a long way to alleviating my fear.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoffman?
Good. New cases, item number 28, 18613BZ, 117 Gildston Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, this is also a proposal to enlarge an existing single-family home. The proposal here is only to extend the front of the building forward at the first and second floors to enlarge the living room. The front yard, there's a front yard of 7'11" that, according to the applicant, complies with the 5-foot front yard requirements. And it's a modest proposal just to extend that front. One thing that does seem to be missing from the application, though, is that the applicant needs to verify that the front yard complies with section 2345-45B2 of the zoning resolution with regard to the depth of the adjoining front yards, and to which by that section, there's a 5-foot minimum on the front yard unless an adjoining property has a deeper front yard, in which case you need to pull the front yard back. So we need to know that that's been analyzed. In addition, there's a proposal to add a balcony within the front yard setback. That's only permitted as an obstruction if it meets the calculations in the zoning resolution. So if the applicant could provide the calculations to show that obstruction is permitted. And also, there's apparently an existing garage on the site, which is not shown on the plans. Any other comments?
The level at grade is actually a basement, so it should actually be part of the floor area calculations, except perhaps the garage area. And it appeared to me that it looked like that might be another unit. Has a nice rear door into the backyard, et cetera, et cetera. So, and there was a reference in the statement that these plans have 3 kitchens.
Yeah, that was confusing.
I know, and I figured, oh, well, that must be the other kitchen in the basement.
Right. But
So-
you don't see the plans have.
No,
3
there's
kitchens,
nothing
no.
on the plans in the basement.
So please clarify what's going on.
I had the same observation. It wasn't clear to me exactly how many families we were talking about here. There seems to be a disparity, whether it's a single family or a 2-family or even the 3-family. So I think they need to kind of clean that up. They also need to indicate on existing buildings on the site. There's a garage that seems to be missing from a couple of their drawings. And then check the size of the second floor bedroom. It looks very small, much smaller than a closet, actually than one of their closets. So I think they need to make sure that they have a legally sized room. And discuss their current permit to legalize that rear stair. They've got an exit stair in the backyard, and they don't really discuss what that is and whether or not that permit is proper.
Anyone else? No? Okay.
Item number 29, 2614BZ, 45 East 75th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. This is a fairly modest request for expansion of the Hewitt School. The one thing I note is I'm not sure that all of the waivers that need to be obtained were requested in the application. I believe that lot coverage is also implicated here because the expansion will increase the degree of noncompliance of the lot coverage. So the applicant and architect should take a look at that. Though the statement of facts were extremely confusing, the architect did provide a good explanation of the planning that leads to the uses specifically in the locations that are the subject of the waiver. The strategic plan, though, which was mentioned quite a lot throughout the application, so when I finally looked at it, I was kind of excited to find out what the strategic plan was going to teach me, and instead, basically what it is the idea that we want a better school, and so therefore we're just going to do better things, but it's actually not a plan that you use to support programmatic requirements. It doesn't say we currently have this many square feet, we currently have these many classrooms, the children are doubled up and, studying on books in the hallways and in closets and so on, and as a result, we need to have this many more classrooms for art and this many more classrooms for this. It doesn't do that at all. And in order to support the programmatic need basis, we need to see that. We really do need detailed backup information. What the school purchased that extra townhouse to expand, and now with the strategic plan, they had the architects look at what would go into that building in order to alleviate crowding. So what goes into that building and what happens to the rest of the building that would justify pushing back into the rear yard and exceeding the height maximum.
I absolutely agree. I think they need to really beef up their programmatic needs section and really be specific as to the amount of children they need to accommodate and why they need to accommodate them, and give us some class schedules or something that really supports needing this additional space. Also, could they tell us if they're going to be utilizing any of the roof area of the new addition? Are they planning on having any outdoor activities? And if so, explain what that is and how they would mitigate any noise from the kids, et cetera. But otherwise, I didn't have anything else to comment on.
Anybody else?
I think it was modest.
Item number 30, 3114BZ, 165 Spencer Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, this one is for a confusing story, which we would like a little clarity on. So apparently, it's a manufacturing building that was purchased by the applicant and kind of converted into a synagogue, or was proposed to be converted into a synagogue, but not really. So we'd like a little clarity on, was the original purpose of the purchase the synagogue, and later morphed into a school, or was it really for a school, and where does the word synagogue fit into that story? So with respect to this, the land use, there's a bunch of things that need to be clarified on the application. The site, for example, is not shown on the land use map, and the land use map doesn't show land uses and zoning districts. That's its function, actually. The 8 sites, so one of the findings is that you have to establish that the applicant looked for other sites that are where this use would be permitted because it's a conforming use, and for whatever reason, those sites were not adequate. Of the 8 sites that were listed and described, only 2 are in an area where the use is conforming. So that's actually an inadequate study to show that there are no available sites. That study needs to be expanded. It also just states that the 2 sites in the R7A zoning district were too expensive. We need backup on that. What does that mean? What's the cost of this site versus that site? What's the renovation cost? That kind of thing that would mean that you would not pursue the R7A district. I note that in the community board recommendation for this particular location is actually incorrect. They provided a recommendation for the same applicant, but for another address, so that actually needs to be corrected if the applicant could help us with that. Also, the EAS has an error concerning the size of the building, which should be corrected. And also, given the number of children, since we're talking about 500 students today, projected to be 800 students in 5 years, which is a lot of students. And it seems that most of them, or very many of them, will be arriving by bus. The EAS really does need to study traffic and parking impacts, especially since we assume there are going to be a lot of buses parked. This is a manufacturing district where there's active manufacturing commercial uses. There's also a residential building adjacent. What's the impact on those residential tenants? And then I just ask, really, so based on the understanding that there's going to be 500 students in this school to start with, and very quickly there's going to be closer to 800, the building is only 26,000 square feet, which if you just do the math is 53 square feet per child, without taking into account any loss factor for stairwells and mechanical space and all those things, and would reduce to 32 square feet a child when the school expands. I'm just wondering, in terms of the programmatic analysis, whether this building can handle those needs, that whether this is really right to be both a lower, a middle, and a high school. I know I started to look for health department regulations, what are the limitations? I'd like to hear from the applicant that kind of loading up of so many children on each floor, and there's 7 classrooms on a floor with 25 kids in each classroom, that they can actually handle this, and that it will meet health department requirements and Department of Education requirements, et cetera.
I too had concerns about the size of the building and whether or not the square footage could handle the amount of children they anticipate. Having 800 kids eventually is very stressful on that kind of a structure. And it looked to me that the current layout that they have might not even support really the 500 that they have now. They have a small kitchen, and as we have grown to learn, that they probably need 2 kitchens. And they don't show that. They don't show really enough space to accommodate the 500 that they really anticipate now. I also had questions concerning how they obtained the financing and how this is exactly working, whether it's currently a synagogue and it's now we're morphing into a school, and it was very unclear in their description, and I think they really need to take a look at their explanation and really rework that so that it makes sense on a lot of different levels. I also had a question. They've got a door to Spencer Street from one of the offices, and I'm wondering what is that? It goes directly to the outside, and is that meant to be an office, or is that some sort of other space supporting the school? And if they could show us, as you said, in more detail why they rejected the sites that they had looked at, maybe something from their real estate person that would explain what the criteria was, and especially about what would be too expensive. So what were they looking for? How much were they willing to pay? And why was it too expensive? And then how did the kids get to school? Where do the buses come from? Who's walking? I guess we've got DOT, if they've weighed in on this for school safety, but we should really know more operationally how this is functioning.
I mean, I agree with you. I think that this block in particular seems to have a lot of active industrial uses, and it's also very active. It took me a long time to make my way down the block because of the trucks and the loading and the workers and everything that was going on. And I feel that the statement was very thin in addressing the potential issues that could negatively affect the children, like the noise, the traffic, the chemical hazards, how children, like you said, how many buses, how children who are walking are getting there. Are there going to be any monitors, any traffic monitors, bus monitors that are going to help facilitate the children's entrance and exit into this school? I think that they need to provide a lot more detail for this application. I found it very thin.
I'd like them to define the surrounding uses. The lot across the street, which they explain is vacant, is no longer vacant. It's a very busy construction site. And I was very concerned because the EAS is written as if this is a change from a synagogue to a school. And there is no synagogue there. And it's actually changing from a manufacturing site to a school. And the rigors are a lot more extreme in terms of a phase 1 and a phase 2 and how it would be analyzed, and I didn't see any of that in the EAS.
Okay. Item number 31, 5614BZ, 161-51-6, Bailey Boulevard, Queens.
I didn't have any comments on it.
Well, it seems that they've cleaned up quite a few of the issues. They've cleaned up the adjacent site. They removed it's not operating, so there's no more U-Haul business. In terms of continuous use, I would like to know if they have any additional information. It seems the best information they have right now, it comes from either the DEC or the fire department, and they were lucky to get a violation in 2012. So if they have anything else. And I don't think they have any landscaping proposed, and the fencing is still in very poor condition.
I agree about the continuous use. The evidence is really quite thin, and actually they're closed now. Did they give us any detail as to how long they've been out of operation? No. So they should be addressing that as well.
Okay.
Item number 32, 114BZ, 1490 Macombs Road, Bronx.
I didn't also have any comments on this one.
Item number 33, 114-14BZ, 2442 East 14th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, I note this is also an enlargement of an existing two-story, single-family home. I note that the community board approved it with 5 dissenting. and that their proposal is to lift to, we'll say, the height of the house is raised to comply with FEMA regulations for base flood elevation. The house is lifted at about 4.5 feet above grade. So the expansion is actually extremely large because it goes deeply into the rear yard. It's actually a very small existing house, but the proposal is to expand over 42 feet backwards into the rear, and reducing the rear yard to 25 feet. The photographs show the imposition of the structure within the central green space would be out of character with adjacent uses. Again, with respect to how deep it goes back. If you just look at the photographs and you look at what's going on in the rear yards of the adjoining properties, having this large structure come all the way back would really be an imposition. I note also that there's a proposal in the front yard to have, well, the existing front yard is only 2 foot 2 inches, in addition to which the side yards are extremely narrow, practically non-existent. There's like a 2 foot side yard and a 3 foot side yard. So 2 foot 2 and a 2 foot 2 front yard. And the proposal is to have a garage there, and there's a little bit of a driveway that sits in front of the garage, which is kind of a normal thing to have a driveway in front of a garage, but I don't actually understand how this will work. So the garage door's down, you forgot your stuff at home, you have to like leave the keys in the car like it's running, and then you run inside. Meanwhile, the car is actually parked on the sidewalk. So I just don't understand how that could possibly be permitted or okay, or why we should permit that. So then I ask also, since the side yards, so the request is to continue the degree of noncompliance in those side yards where the side yards are so tiny. And I'd like to know, because you've got the existing bedrooms in the existing building look both to the front, to the side, and to the rear. So each of those rooms has a view to front yard or rear yard. The proposal is to have bedrooms that obtain their sole source of light and air from a 2 foot 2 inch wide side yard. And so I would like to know, what is the distance of those bedrooms, or that wall as proposed, to the adjoining property, in terms of if there's a way to effectively borrow light and air from the adjoining property, because otherwise I'm not even sure that, the bedrooms are barely occupiable with only a 2 foot 2 side yard. Not even sure they're really occupiable. We also still need a streetscape photo montage to show the compatibility of this building with the neighborhood. And there was an urban cartographic study which shows the sites with FARs greater than 1.25, but no explanation for why the 1.25 was permissible. Are these pre-61 buildings, or are they subjects of special approvals? Most examples that were used actually appear to be pre-61 attached row houses on very small lots. So it's not really apples to apples. The attached row house obviously is under a totally different set of constraints because there's no side yard regulations in that case. Any other comments?
I too had questions concerning the length of the building and whether or not this might actually be considered a new building as opposed to just an addition. So I think they need to come back and explain why, because the addition is larger than the original building. So I think they need to come back and talk about that. Also, I think they need to explain that garage. And if they feel that the garage placement is in some way grandfathered because of where the front wall exists, they need to talk about that, because otherwise they do need, about 18 feet in front of the garage. So they'll need to explain that. And let's see, I know I had something else here to say. Oh, and I think they need to take a look at their grading again, because it appears that where the garage is, they might not have enough headroom, and if they're planning on having some slope, they don't really talk about that, but it doesn't appear that they would actually have the headroom to be able to fit the car in the garage, where, at least where they're saying that the first floor level is, you got to give some, something for structure. So where the bottom of that joist, of the floor joist is going to be, I think they need to take a look at that. I think they're a little off. So those are my comments.
Okay. Anyone else?
No.
Okay. Item number 34, 150 14BZ, 30 Broad Street, Manhattan.
I didn't have any comments on this one.
99.
This concludes the October 27th executive session of the Board of Standards and Appeals.